Hello everyone, my name is Hossein Abedsoltan. I am a PhD candidate in chemical engineering from the University of Toledo, Ohio, USA. I am happy today that I can present my work at the AICHE annual meeting for 2020, and let's get started by sharing my presentation slides with you. My today topic is about polyphosphatidylstyrene sulfonic acid, PSSA, as a recoverable and reusable catalyst for acid hydrolysis of polyethylene terephthalate. My today talk has 5 parts. In the first part, I'm talking about the importance of plastic recycling. In the second part, I'm talking about the previous works that have been done so far for the acid hydrolysis of the PET. In the third part, I'm talking about PSSA as a potential reusable and recoverable acid catalyst for PET hydrolysis. And in the last 2 parts, I present my results and conclusions. Polymer recycling is an important area in recent years, specifically due to the vast amounts of the plastic products that we use in our life. As you can see on the left, we have the graph for the distribution of most common plastics in 2015. This graph shows that 86% of all plastics were made up of 6 polymers: polyurethane, polyethylene terephthalate, polystyrene, polyvinyl chloride, polypropylene, and polyethylene. My today talk is about polyethylene terephthalate PET, which has a 9% share, and it is mainly used in packaging and textile industry. On the right side, we have the global cumulative plastic waste graph. In this graph, we can see that on 2015, the discarded amount of the plastic waste was considerably much higher than the waste that were recycled and incinerated. However, it is anticipated that in 2050 we are going to have more plastic waste to be incinerated, while for the recycled amount it is far from the incinerated and discarded amount. So it is really desirable to find and propose recycling techniques in order to recycle the plastic wastes. As mentioned in the previous slide, my today talk is on PET waste, and now let's see how the PET wastes are handled. As you can see on the left side, we have a graph that shows how the PET wastes were managed in USA in 2017. This graph shows that most of the PET waste were landfilled while the minimum was recycled. These recycled PET wastes were used in different areas, which are shown on the right graph, on the right side graph, in non-food bottles, food and beverage bottles, strapping, sheet and film, and fiber, where fiber has the biggest share among the other areas. Tertiary or chemical recycling of PET is the main approach in order to get back to the constituents of the PET. There are 3 main approaches in chemical recycling of PET: glycolysis, hydrolysis, methanolysis. My today talk is on hydrolysis, which can be conducted in 3 forms: acid hydrolysis, alkaline hydrolysis, and neutral hydrolysis, depending on the type of the catalyst used in the reaction. The hydrolysis reaction has the main product of the TPA, terephthalic acid, which is the monomer for the PET. Now let's look at the previous works that have been done so far with conventional acids to do the acid hydrolysis of the PET. As you can see in this chart shows the reaction conditions for the conventional acids in order to get more than 90% TPA yield. This table shows that for conventional acids, we have a challenge of high temperature, high pressure, and high acid concentration. So it is really desirable to find more active catalyst, or to design more active catalyst that we can do hydrolysis of the PET in milder reaction conditions. Acid hydrolysis itself is a surface reaction. That means protons attack to the surface of the PET, and the reaction happens on the surface of the PET. After that, we have the produced products which can be detached from the PET surface if we have a good steering in our reaction medium. The factors that are important and are effective on the surface reaction are temperature and pressure, catalyst concentration, particle size, and surface weathering. Another challenge with using conventional acids is that we have to neutralize them and to dispose them, which is detrimental to our environment. So it is really intriguing to find or design the acid catalyst that can be recovered and reused. PSSA was reported as a recoverable and reusable catalyst for tributylene methanolysis, biodiesel synthesis, and xylose dehydration to furfural. That's why we selected PSSA as a potential acid catalyst for PET hydrolysis. To prepare our PSSA, we used the sodium form of polyestyrene sulfonate. What we did was we did a ion exchange reaction, and after that we recovered our PSSA and we did titration, and we found that our produced PSSA had a 4.7 millimole protons per gram. To calculate the PET conversion and the TPA yield, we used following equations respectively. Now let's see how the acid hydrolysis process was conducted in the lab. We prepared our reaction medium along with the ground PET as the sample in the 8 pressure reactor. After that, we did the reactions at the reaction temperature between 130 and 150 centigrade, and the reaction time was between 0 to 40 hours. This picture shows the hydrolysis reaction setup, and after the reaction we did filtration in order to separate the produced TPA and unreacted PET from PSSA, water, and ethylene glycol. After that, in order to separate the produced TPA from the unreacted PET, we dissolved the particles in 5 molar ammonium hydroxide and we did filtration. With that, we could separate the PET from the TPA and ammonium hydroxide. Now, in order to precipitate out the TPA from our ammonium hydroxide solution, we added acid and we brought the pH of the solution to 2, and then we did a final filtration in order to obtain our TPA. Now let's look at the results. On the left side, we have the graph that shows the reaction kinetics for the reaction temperature of 100 and 140 for the 2 molar protons solutions of PSSA and sulfuric acid. This graph shows that the PSSA is a more active catalyst than sulfuric acid. This graph also shows that the inception time for the PSSA is shorter than the inception time for the sulfuric acid, which relates to the structure and the interactions the PSSA solution has with the PET particles, which I talk more about it in subsequent slides. On the right side, we have the graph that shows the reaction times needed for different reaction temperatures in order to get to 90% TPA yield for 2 molar protein solutions of PSSA and sulfuric acid. As it is expected, by increasing the reaction temperature, the reaction time decreases for both catalysts. The important point in this graph is that the PSSA needs considerably lower reaction time in comparison with sulfuric acid, which means that the PSSA is a more active catalyst than sulfuric acid. In order to analyze our data, we used the shrinking core model for acid hydrolysis. The assumption for this model is that the produced TPA on the PET surface won't deposit on the PET surface, and it is possible to consider that the produced TPA was detached from the surface. It is a fair assumption because we had an excellent steering in our reaction medium, so we can say that the produced TPA was detached from the surface after the production. The apparent reaction rate constant can then be defined by using this equation, where it is 3 multiplied by reaction rate constant, multiplied by the concentration of the acid divided by density of the PET and the initial radius of the PET particle. Now let's look at the temperature effect on apparent K values for 2 molar proton solutions of PSSA. As this graph shows, by increasing the temperature, the reaction temperature, the apparent K values increases for both catalysts. However, the PSSA has more apparent K values in comparison with sulfuric acid, which means PSSA is a more active catalyst than sulfuric acid. To calculate the activation energy for both catalysts, we used Arrhenius equation, and we found that for 2 molar proton solutions, the PSSA had 23.1 kilojoule per mole activation energy, while the activation energy for sulfuric acid was 35.5 kilojoule per mole. That means the PSSA needs less energy than sulfuric acid in order to start the hydrolysis of the PET, and it means that PSSA again is a more active catalyst than sulfuric acid. This graph shows the concentration effect on apparent K values at reaction temperature of 150. As expected, by increasing the concentration, the apparent K value increases for both catalysts, and again the PSSA has more K values in comparison with sulfuric acid, which means that again the PSSA is a more active catalyst than sulfuric acid. Now we want to explain why the PSSA is more active than sulfuric acid when they have the same amounts of proton in the solution. The reason goes back to the structure of the PSSA. It was reported previously that the PSSA can adsorb to the hydrophobic surfaces. PET has a hydrophobic structure, and PSSA has regions that it has benzene rings where it makes it actually hydrophobic, and that's why it can adsorb from those regions to the PET surface, and that's why it improves the surface wetting, and we had a better activity with PSSA rather than sulfuric acid. In order to confirm this hypothesis, we did contact angle measurements, and we found that by increasing the concentration, the sulfuric acid contact angle value was rather constant and near to the water, while for the PSSA, the contact angle value decreased considerably by increasing the concentration. That means the PSSA adsorbed to the surface of the PET film, while the sulfuric acid doesn't have that feature. And that causes the PSSA has a more activity as a catalyst, and that's why we saw a shorter inception time for PSSA in comparison with sulfuric acid. In order to confirm the reusability of the PSSA, we recovered the PSSA by evaporation of the filtrate, and then we ran the reaction every time for 5 times, and we got this graph for the PET conversion and the TPA yield. We also did titration, which indicated that the catalyst retained its acid sites pretty well, and this shows that this acid is recoverable and reusable. In conclusion, PSSA has a higher reaction rate attributed to the improved surface wetting. PSSA has a lower activation energy than sulfuric acid when they have the same amounts of protons in solution. PSSA is recoverable and reusable with no loss of activity, and this work was submitted to the Polymer Degradation and Stability Journal. In the end, I would like to acknowledge Polymer Institute of University of Toledo, AICHE Polyester for contribution of PET, and my colleague Ibe Amdullah. Thank you very much for attending to my presentation, and I would be happy to answer if you have any questions.